Hello, this is Alex, and today I'd like to share with you a new mass of troops that I just finished this afternoon. And I'd also like to share with you how my thoughts on multi-basing figures have changed recently. So first, let me show you this new unit in my growing Carthaginian army. Get these champions out of the way, and here they are. So these are African levied spearmen. I'm thinking Libyan spearmen, freshly raised. And they're rather quickly painted. I'm not the best painter. I'm still getting into the hobby. I've been doing it for a little over a year. But I think they turned out okay. And I paid pretty close attention to how they're positioned and how they look with respect to each other on the base. So let's talk about the material and the method first. So these are Victrix 28mm Carthaginians, and they are coming primarily from two sets, the Warriors of Carthage set and the Citizen Infantry set. And I placed these men, 27 men in total, on a single integrated base. So I'm very happy with how it turned out. I wanted the soldiers' positions to look organic and interesting, to look like they're just getting ready to close with the enemy, and they're forming ranks rather quickly. And there's a few men hurling javelins in the back, which I think is a nice touch. So I did not use shield transfers, though I usually do. I wanted these men to look fresh and unadorned. Their duty, they're only here because of their duty. They're not professionals, they're not mercenaries, and they're not particularly rich. So in terms of the painting method, I painted them up with a simple base layer and wash. Used metallics on the helmet and the spears, of course. Very little highlighting. I didn't pay too much attention on highlights and touching up the edges. I did spend a fair amount of time on the two Greeks in front, which I'll talk about soon. In terms of the paints, let me share that with you. So the paints are over here. I used Pro Acrylic Tan Flesh for most of the skin tones, and the three base colors right here that I used are white, tan, and brown. Of course, I washed them, as I mentioned. I'm using the Army Painter soft tone primarily, a little bit of the strong tone as well. When it comes to the metallics, I'm using Pro Acryl again, and there's a lot of bronze, but also the dark silver and silver mixed together to make the iron and spears tips, and used black, good old Vallejo black for the hair, and also used a fair bit of ivory as well, a little off-white. For the special troops, I did include some purples, a little bit of speed paint as well, the cavalry brown, and for the officer, also the dark gray blue, which is a great color. Yeah, so those are the paints. Let's go back to the unit. All right. So as far as the basing goes, I used a simple desert, dry Mediterranean look. And I think the dark brown shields, the light desert gravel, the light and tan tunics, and the dull bronze helmets, I think those four pieces go together really well, especially the light sand and the dark shields. So in terms of tips on ranking spearmen up this close, I got to use the overhand thrust position and angle the spear downward, if you can, to give room for the guys behind to approach within spear length, so you can get them nice and close up together. Now you'll look here on the right, on the left. I did rank these guys up pretty close together. I could have ranked them up even closer, but I think this is close enough as is. Now what you don't want is you don't want to use underhand, of course, and you also don't want to use position kind of similar to this guy here. I guess he is doing underhand technically, but yeah, to see that tough, how that spear is poking way back at about eye level. It's going to be hard if all of your soldiers are ranked up like that. There's not going to be a lot of space behind each guy in front who's wielding a spear like that. But, you know, I'm sure you can figure out if you try hard enough. This is the way I tried to do it. This was my philosophy. So angle the spear down if you can to leave room for the guy behind, as if they're holding the spear at the ready. All right, so let's talk about the character of the unit. So as I mentioned before, this is supposed to represent a freshly levied unit of non-professionals. And these are Libyans, or perhaps poor Libo-Phoenicians or poor Phoenicians who have been levied for campaign. They are African infantry. And some of their shields I hand-painted on, some rather hastily painted sigils of their gods in white. But the single shield here, that's a shield transfer. I did not hand paint that shield. So, you know, looking at them, you know, they're unarmored, but they're well equipped enough. You know, they have a very large shield, a large scutum, a stout spear, and each of them carries a short sword, which is not too shabby. So the state that's equipping them is rich enough to provide them with that. And, you know, from the front, you could see that, you know, just the shield alone is a pretty effective weapon system. It covers their bodies real well. But, you know, still, you wouldn't want them to close with legionaries. The legionaries would probably, the Roman legionaries would probably carve them up in a fair fight. But, you know, you wouldn't want to fight Romans in a fair fight in this time period. So, the time period, I'm aiming for about the mid-3rd century. So, you know, about the First Punic War down to about the Second Punic War, around that era. Some of my units have chainmail, or mail, the Lorica Hamada, and that came around this time period, probably closer to the Second Punic War. So, you know, keep it consistent with that. I'm imagining these men come from about that time period. So they are led by a Greek strategos, a general for hire here. And I spent a good amount of time on this guy. I think he looks pretty good. So you'll notice he has a very nice breastplate, richly adorned. He hails from Thebes, and I like to think he served in the wars between the Antigonids and the Aetolian and the other leagues of Greece. I think it's called the Achaean League. That's right, the Aetolian and the Achaean League that fought during this time period, also with Sparta. So he's a veteran of those campaigns. He was hired by Carthage to whips these raw recruits into shape and get them in fighting form. Very similar to the Spartan general Xanthippus, who successfully led the Carthaginians against the Romans at the end of the First Punic War. So the Carthaginians appreciate their Greek generals, that's for sure. He's accompanied here by his shieldbearer, who of course bears his shield, his richly adorned shield, and he is chanting the paean, the Greek war chant. He may be far away from his home country, but the gods are always watching. And with men like this, he needs all the help he can get. I also like the fact that he's holding a spear at the ready. Like, he's not nearly as fresh and jittery as the rest of these men. He knows battle will come when it comes. All right, let's talk about multibasing. So when I first started miniature painting just over a year ago, I wanted to single base my miniatures. Like this. This is a old, not that old, you know, a year ago, an old Victrix Dark Age figure, a couple of them. These are Saxons. So I wanted to single base my miniatures. I interpreted each figure as a man, and you know, what you see is what you got. I didn't want to waste my figures by attaching them to, you know, a bunch of other miniatures. You know, what if I wanted to use them later for a skirmish game? Well then, you know, I couldn't use them if they're all multi-based together. So I never would have painted back then this lovely looking Norman crossbowman. Because, you know, who wants to play with a guy who is perpetually reloading? It's not very heroic. But my thoughts on this have slowly changed. I, you know, cranked through dozens of single figures, but never really thought of them as a cohesive body of men. I never really got that sense of completion. Like, you know, I've completed a unit of Vikings or a unit of Saxons. And I've always thought that massed combat, it's the highest form of wargaming. And you know, after watching a bunch of YouTube videos about wargaming systems and battle reports, I began to look for a compromise solution. So I made these custom movement trays. They're right here. I drilled holes in some what's called MDF board manually, you know, did that by hand with a drill. And, you know, they work. You can definitely put figures in them. But, you know, this is only like a compromise solution. Still doesn't quite feel like a body of men in my mind. Just a personal preference. So, you know, just about 2 or 3 months ago, I decided to really go for it and start massing soldiers up on a single base. And here we have, you know, the culmination of this idea. And you know, I think it looks pretty good. I'll probably have a little bit of trouble wargaming. It might be a little hard to use this for wargaming. But you know, at the same time, the frontage is right for, say, a unit from Hail Caesar. You know, when it comes to wargaming, if I go down that route someday, I'll figure that out when it comes. So I've got 3 more units of soldiers or men just like this. I've got 1 cavalry unit that I'm working on and 2 more close order infantry. Hope to have those done soon. And I just had a bunch of new miniatures arrive from Agama and Victrix. And I'm looking forward to getting those painted up. So that's all for me today. Hope you're doing well, and I will make a new video soon. Have a good one.